Tuesday, March 20th, 2012. Many of you have probably seen the presidential executive order that was released on March 16th, which would have been Friday. Isn't it ironic how the federal government seems to always release or dump information at a time when the media is going home for the weekend and the American public is going away from work and they're going out to play? So President Obama dumps on us the National Defense Resource Preparedness Executive Order. Folks, when I read this the first time, I realized that we were at the precipice of martial law in America. Now, it has taken many years to get to this document, to this point in time. Since 9/11, America has been on a slow, controlled descent into corporatized, bureaucratic police state tyranny, which will culminate in total martial law. Now, I want to cover a few documents just to show you a brief history over the last 10 years of where we started and where we are today. Black's Law Dictionary. Everybody should have one of these. Now, this is a modern version. This is a pocket version dated 1996. I actually found this at a Goodwill used bookstore. The older versions, the closer you can get to the founding of this country, like the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, when you go back in time, you have less revision of words and what they mean. Anyway, I wanted to read the definition of martial law according to Black's Law Dictionary: a body of rules applied on grounds of necessity by a country's rulers when the civil government has failed or appears as if it might fail to function. The military assumes control and enforces these rules purportedly until civil processes and courts can be restored to their lawful places. So you see from Black's Law Dictionary that it is when the government has failed or appears as if it might fail. Okay? Let's go back to 9/11. Immediately thereafter, we had the Patriot Act, which allowed for wiretapping and domestic surveillance of American citizens under the guise of the FISA courts. And you had this legislation which was in the can prior to 9/11 and couldn't pass until after an act like that occurred, and we could go through the whole the events leading up to 9/11, the predictors of it, the prior indicators, but I want to focus on what has taken place within our bureaucracy since that point in time. And I've got a copy of Homeland Security Presidential Directives 7 and 8. These little gems were issued in December of 2003. And I actually came across these when I was taking a training course for my day job. Now, I just want to read some of these because these documents here show or lay the groundwork for the co-opting of the state and local governments by the federal government. It's the erasing of the 10th Amendment, the erasing of state power, state control, overtaking it by the federal government through the use of tax dollars, through grants and other means. Now, Homeland Security Directive number 8, the purpose of this is stated This directive establishes policies to strengthen the preparedness of the United States to prevent and respond to threatened or actual domestic terrorist attacks, major disasters, and other emergencies by requiring a national domestic all-hazards preparedness goal, establishing mechanisms for improved delivery of federal preparedness assistance to state and local governments, and outlining actions to strengthen preparedness capabilities of federal, state, and local entities. The term all-hazards preparedness refers to preparedness for domestic terrorist attacks, major disasters, and other emergencies. So you see, Homeland Security, FEMA, the combination of the two, is for anything that the government wants it to be for, real or imagined. And if we go down further, federal preparedness assistance, these are the definitions in this directive. Federal preparedness assistance means federal department and agency grants, cooperative agreements, loans, loan guarantees, training, and or technical assistance provided to state and local governments and the private sector to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from terrorist attacks. I'm going to go through here and just hit some highlighted areas so you can get a feel for what's in these government documents. The Secretary of Homeland Security, in coordination with the Attorney General and other appropriate federal departments and agencies, and in consultation with state and local governments, shall establish and maintain a comprehensive training program to meet the national preparedness goal. Talks about state and local governments throughout. Specialized federal assets such as teams, stockpiles, and caches shall be maintained at levels consistent with the national preparedness goal and be available for response activities as set forth in the National Response Plan. This also includes the Secretary of Defense. Okay, Homeland Security Presidential Directive Number 7. Now remember, these were under the great Republican President George W. Bush. Homeland Security Presidential Directive Number 7. This directive establishes a national policy for federal departments and agencies to identify and prioritize United States critical infrastructure and key resources and to protect them from terrorist attacks. It sounds mundane until you get into the details, much like the executive order that Obama issued on the 16th of this month. This document, number 7, goes on under roles and responsibilities of the Secretary. The Secretary shall serve as the principal federal official to lead, integrate, and coordinate implementation of efforts among federal departments and agencies, state and local governments, and the private sector to protect critical infrastructure and key resources. So we are also bringing in the private sector into the mix, merging the government and private industry, tearing down the walls, nationalizing everything. This is back in 2003. In accordance with applicable laws or regulations, the department and the sector-specific agencies will collaborate with appropriate private sector entities and continue to encourage the development of information sharing and analysis mechanisms. Additionally, the department and sector-specific agencies shall collaborate with the private sector and continue to support sector coordinating mechanisms. It goes on and on and on. The blending of federal government, state government, private industry. Okay, that's back in 2003. Then on our slow descent into martial law and tyranny, we had in 2009 some real gems. February 2009. Many of you may remember this document. This is the MIAC Fusion Report. 2009, Missouri Fusion Center. These fusion centers were all developed after 9/11, after the implementation of the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security. These little lovely organizations have popped up all over America. There's one here where I live that was opened a couple months ago. And they gather information and generate and distribute reports to law enforcement agencies. So the 2009 Missouri Fusion report gave such great information that indicated you could possibly be a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, if you had the Gadsden flag on your car, if you displayed material that depicted the IRS, the FBI, the ATF, the CIA, the United Nations, any law enforcement in the New World Order in a derogatory manner. If you supported Ron Paul, Chuck Baldwin, or Bob Barr, or other third-party groups, or the Constitutional Party, or the Campaign for Liberty, that could be a sign or an indicator of a potential radical domestic terrorist. So in America, if you like the Constitution, according to our government and the new homeland that we're living in, you're a terrorist. In April of 2009, the Office of Intelligence and Analysis within the Department of Homeland Security produced a report called Right-Wing Extremism, Current Economic and Political Climate Fueling Resurgence in Radicalization and Recruitment. This little gem of a document was released, and it said basically that returning veterans from the wars in the Middle East will be more prone to hang out and associate with people, domestic terrorists, and be co-opted into their way of thinking and are a threat to the federal government. Let's move on to 2011, November. The federal government, FEMA, put out a contract for staffing and resourcing the FEMA camps that don't exist. And this document, Statement of Work for Federal Emergency Management Agency, National Continuity Programs, Program and Mission Support Services. All this stuff can be found online. This document, NCP, serves as the focal point for FEMA activities involving continuity of operations, continuity of government, integrated public alert and warning. You remember the test of the nationwide emergency alert system a couple months ago that cut in nationwide? Well, here you go. NCP is the lead agent for the federal executive branch concerning continuity operations. NCP's mission is to serve the public. They're serving us. They're protecting us by protecting the nation's constitutional form of government by helping to minimize the disruption of essential government operations under any event. Well, thank you, FEMA, for being there to protect us. 2012. Ron Paul's Texas Straight Talk from March 19th was discussing the demolishment of due process in America. And he writes, "It is ironic, but perhaps sadly appropriate, that Attorney General Eric Holder would choose a law school, Northwestern University, to deliver a speech earlier this month in which he demolished what was left of the rule of law in America. In what history will likely record as a turning point, Attorney General Holder bluntly explained that this administration believes it has the authority to use lethal force against Americans if the president determines them to be a threat to the nation." Man, are we thankful that he and FEMA are looking out for us. He tells us that this is not a violation of the due process requirements of our Constitution because the president himself embodies due process, as he unilaterally determines who is to be targeted. As Holder said, a careful and thorough executive branch review of the facts in a case amounts to due process. That means that the administration believes it is the president himself who is to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Now, you know the right to trial is in the Constitution.